This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Wow. So not just one, but two signings in one day for Liverpool as Diogo Jota joins Thiago Alcantara in signing for the Premier League champions. A deal which could reach £45 million sees the Portuguese move from Molineux to Melwood after 3 years under Nuno Espirito Santo at Wolves. Alongside myself, Guy Clarke, Matt Addison is here with us for a transfer special edition of The Agenda. Matt, this is all good fun, isn't it?
Yeah, what a day it's been. Obviously, Thiago Alcantara on his own would have been an absolutely monumental signing for Liverpool, but Diogo Jota as well coming in from Wolves, it just makes this day doubly exciting. We've been so busy trying to cover everything today, but it's absolutely well worth it. I think these are two potentially transformational signings for Liverpool, and Jota is a player that we've seen plenty of over the last couple of years whilst he's been at Wolves. You know, he's a player that has impressed me every time I've seen him, and I'm just so excited to see this one get over the line. Very quickly, it's been done. You know, very quickly we learnt about the interest. The fee has now been agreed. Everything is done. He is a Liverpool player, and yeah, it's an exciting time, isn't it, to be covering Liverpool at this stage. And you know, normally we'd be building up to that big game against Chelsea at the weekend, but that's almost been put on the back burner for now because this is just such a huge deal.
Yeah, and I suppose they're two deals actually coming together, but then looking at them, that are polar opposite. We knew about the Thiago rumours. They were rumbling on and on and on. He wasn't an active target. Liverpool opened the talks earlier in the week, and that all came to fruition, whereas this one, Diogo Jota was left out of Wolves' game with Stoke in the Carabao Cup last night, and there was a few murmurings that something might be going on. And then all of a sudden, it's transpired. He's signed for Liverpool. He's the third signing of the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's sort of the feeling that I had really was that people were putting two and two together. Obviously, Jota, an unused substitute for the first match of Wolves' Premier League season, didn't play at all, wasn't even on the bench, as you say, in the Carabao Cup. And Nuno Espirito Santo not really giving away the reason why that was. I think people then sort of thought, well, potentially given the transfer windows open, possibly he's on the move. Where might make sense? Well, Liverpool certainly would make sense because they were looking for a further backup option for those front three players, if I can speak properly. It's been a long day. But Diogo Jota certainly would fill all of those three roles, both left and right. He can play through the middle as well. So, yeah, at first I just thought it was, two and two being put together by plenty of people. But actually, when you think about it, and obviously now the deal has been done, it just makes so much sense, doesn't it? If Liverpool can get a player who is 23, he's on the verge of becoming potentially a world-class player, which is sort of the kind of profile that Liverpool tend to target. It just makes a great deal of sense for them to have done this deal, and I think that's probably why they've done it as quickly as what they have done.
Yeah, and I suppose this deal you could say is somewhat a hallmark, a throwback, a trademark Michael Edwards / Jurgen Klopp production, because Diogo Jota comes in 23 years of age, not too dissimilar to the age which Sadio Mane arrived at Liverpool 4 years ago. And he comes with a bit of Premier League experience, having had 2 years with Wolverhampton Wanderers in what you would say are an upper mid-table side looking to get into European football and playing European football, as he did, of course, last season with Wolves. And now he comes to Liverpool looking to take that next step.
Yeah, he's a player, as I say, who's always impressed me. Last season, you look at the goal contributions, 22 goals and assists in 48 matches, which, is a really, really decent sort of return for any player, really. But certainly, somebody who tends to play out wide, who's not potentially at his peak years yet. Well, clearly he isn't at the age of 23. So, yeah, not 24 until December. As I say, it just fits that profile of being a Liverpool player. He reminds me very much of when Liverpool signed Sadio Mane. Obviously, he had impressed at Southampton. He'd always been a little bit inconsistent, if you like, for them. But then you always thought that there was, a consistent performer in there for someone like Jurgen Klopp to pick out. So I think that's where this deal sort of will come into its own. I think we're going to see Diogo Jota potentially improve, certainly this season, but over the next couple of seasons. It's a player who you can see getting a lot of minutes, not just obviously the fact that he's got so much quality, but the fact that he can play in all three of those attacking positions, I think gives him the greatest opportunity to succeed. So yeah, as I say, a little bit inconsistent at times for Wolves, particularly last season, reading some of the pieces and comments that have been written today about the interest from Liverpool. But Again, it's the kind of thing that if he's inconsistent but still manages to contribute 22 goals, that's not a bad point to be kicking off from. And I think, that's sort of reflective of the fee that Liverpool pay, as you say, could rise potentially to 45 million. We understand it's around 41 million pounds, the deal. So yeah, it's a sort of significant investment for Liverpool, but I think similar to, that was the case with Sadio Mane as well. I think one or two people thought that was probably a little bit too high at the time, myself included. But in time, that just looks like an absolute bargain now. And you wouldn't be massively shocked if in 2 or 3 years' time, we're talking about Jota in a very similar way.
Yeah, obviously the pedantics within the fee will get rumbled around. There'll be different numbers being thrown around here, there, and everywhere. But looking at Diogo Jota's numbers, and in 3 years at Wolverhampton Wanderers, he's played 131 times. He's scored 44 goals. He's also assisted 19 in that time. So 63 goal contributions. He's not too far off a goal contribution every other game, which for a side like Wolverhampton Wanderers is very impressive. And the point you make there about he will come in, he'll be wanting to play, he will get minutes. He's only missed, I make it, 11 league games in 3 years at Wolverhampton Wanderers. And of course, one of those was in a 46-game campaign in the Championship. He is a player who is a consistent performer in terms of being on the pitch, and I'm sure he'll be looking to continue that. It is similar, I suppose, in many ways to the likes of Mane, Salah and Firmino. Those three don't miss many games, and neither does Diogo Jota.
Yeah, it's very much one of the boxes that has to be ticked with potential signings. We've seen, obviously, Michael Edwards and his data team behind the scenes go into so much detail in so many different aspects. And the injury thing is very much one of those things. I think Jota is the right profile. As you say, he doesn't miss many matches. He's very versatile. He's obviously got the endurance of being a Premier League player. He's done that now for 2 seasons and been relatively consistent compared to his age. So yeah, he's got a lot of improving to do, certainly to match the level of someone like Mane or Salah. But the potential and that ceiling is very much there for him to do that. So I think it's a really exciting project signing almost for Jurgen Klopp. We've seen him develop so many players over the time that he has been at Liverpool. And Jota very much, I think, will be looking forward to making sure that he is the next one for that to be the case for. Obviously, there's no pressure on him to come in and immediately turn into the next Mohamed Salah, because Salah and Mane are still going to be at Liverpool for the next couple of seasons. So it gives him a little bit of time to bed in. But of course, as we keep saying, we keep coming back to these numbers. He's very much an established Premier League player at this stage. He's played in Europe as well, 9 goals in 14 Europa League appearances last season. He's very much got that pedigree. And if we're talking about him as a backup option to come in and maybe deputise for these players, that's exactly what you want. You want an established player who can find the back of the net, who's very creative, who fits in with the sort of pressing style of play that Liverpool have. He's just perfect in every way. And I think that is, essentially why Liverpool have moved for this player. We've said all summer that they're not going to spend money for the sake of it. It's got to be the absolute perfect player for them to bring in. And I think Jota very much represents that. You're on mute, Guy.
It seems to be, sorry for muting myself there. It seems to be one of those where it's the pedigree and the potential really for Liverpool today. Thiago Alcantara, a guy who's won 2 Champions Leagues, who's been at the likes of Barcelona and Bayern Munich, and Diogo Jota and what he could go on and achieve. It was on the Blood Red podcast earlier in the day with our Liverpool correspondent Paul Gorston, chief LFC writer Ian Doyle, and within that we were speaking of at the time what we thought was interesting Diogo Jota. We've seen obviously how quickly this has escalated and moved forward, and the talk at the time was obviously Liverpool have held an interest in Ismaila Sarr, but they've gone for Diogo Jota. What do you think it is that's tipped the balance in the favour of the Portuguese?
I think there's a number of different factors. I think obviously the fact that Jota is a couple of years further on in his development, just the fact that he is nearly 2 years older than Sarr, the fact that he's had 2 seasons in the Premier League rather than just the one. I think there are certain things that do point towards him being a better value option at this stage, as well as going forward. Obviously, Sarr is an excellent player, has a very, very high ceiling. I think Jota has an equally high ceiling, but is maybe further along sort of progression and that journey at this stage. So he's more of an immediate impact type player. He's somebody who can come in and I think probably the valuations of the two players from the clubs as well will have made a significant difference. I spoke to a Watford Observer reporter, Ryan Gray, a couple of days ago, and he essentially said that a senior source at Watford had told him that Liverpool could possibly buy Ismaila Sarr's left leg for £40 million. For $1 million or two more, they've managed to get the entirety of Jota. So I think it makes sense in that way. I think it makes sense in terms of obviously the profile. But yeah, I think there was a couple of things that maybe would have made Jota slightly stick out. I think the sort of availability of him. We know that Watford have already sold the Corre this summer for 25 million. They've also sold a left back to Villarreal, I think it is, for 15 million. They're absolutely not in need of any money or finances. They were under no pressure to sell. Of course, Wolves weren't in a particularly struggling financial position either, but Liverpool have obviously determined that Wolves were more likely to let their player go for a reasonable fee than what Watford would have been. So it just makes sense. I think obviously the finances behind the scenes, we don't know exactly what has gone on or exactly the order of preference of those two players, but I do think there's one or two things that sort of point towards Jota being the better option at this moment in time for Liverpool.
Yeah, Jurgen Klopp as well today spoke in his press conference, which was, of course, dominated by Thiago Alcantara, about fixture congestion, the fact that Liverpool will have a lot of games to play this season, and it's not really until you're really in the moment that you understand how grueling the fixture list will be. We're obviously only into the second week of the season, but it's something Jurgen Klopp has obviously been keen to get is, I suppose, a specialist backup in one of those wide forward positions, because Divock Origi's filled that role for a little while. We've seen Minamino do it at the back end of last season, but Diogo Jota is a true sort of specialist, natural in certainly those wide left and right positions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's obviously important. We're going to see a lot of fixture congestion. It seems almost silly to be talking about it, given that Liverpool had to play 2 games in 24 hours last season. But this season, we are going to very much see that on a more week-by-week basis. Liverpool are going to have a game pretty much every 3 or 4 days for the entirety of the campaign. I think it's the season from start to finish is something like 5 weeks shorter than what it was scheduled to be last season. So it's obviously going to be a difficult situation to fit in that sort of thing. I think obviously you look at someone like Tottenham. I think they've got 3 games within the space of 7 days next week with the Europa League, the Carabao Cup, and everything else to fit in around it. So Liverpool are not the only ones who are going to be in that situation, but certainly it's going to help if they can have certain levels of squad depth and that sort of thing. And the closer that you can get those backup options to your normal front line, the better. Of course, Jota is not at the level of Mane or Salah at this stage, but he's not too far off. And I think if you put him in there along with 2 of the usual front 3, you wouldn't really see the team drop off too much, which is exactly what Liverpool fans have been crying out for.
Yeah, certainly. Well, as we sort of get towards wrapping things up, how significant do you think today will be, that we'll look back on today and think that really was the day that Liverpool signalled their intent, not only in the transfer market, but in defending their Premier League title? Because it is 2 fantastic signings, even in isolation. But when you put them together, it just seems so significant and so exciting for Liverpool supporters to have brought in 2, one world-class and one potentially world-class options within the same day.
Yeah, it could be a day that we look back on as being a monumental time. I think obviously Thiago comes in and, as you say, he's very much a ready-made player who can just slot into that first 11, immediately make a huge impact. And Jota similarly as well. I think obviously the fact that he's played in the Premier League before is in his favour. You would imagine that he won't take a huge amount of time to settle. So yeah, both of these players are going to be huge for Liverpool going forward. Over the next 3 or 4 years or so, Liverpool are going to see the peak years of Thiago. We're going to see, obviously, the improvement of what we expect Jota will take. And if he can do what someone like Sadio Mane has done, the future can only be bright for Liverpool. I think, it was important in terms of that succession plan to make sure that they didn't do all of the replacements for the front 3 in one go. You wanted to do maybe one this summer, one next, and one the following one as well. So I think it was important for Liverpool to do this deal. I think they've sensed an opportunity and they've got that deal over the line now. So yeah, a massively exciting time for everyone involved, really. It's a really important deal to get over the line, certainly the Thiago one. But I think Jota is a very, very good bonus as well.
Yeah, and when you sort of look at what everyone else has got up to in the window, a lot's been said, read and written about Chelsea and the players they bought, the money they've spent. Manchester City actually have been relatively quiet after a lot of noise that they would be really active, and obviously early on brought in Ferran Torres and Nathan Ake, and Manchester United really have only brought in Donny van der Beek. So Liverpool now, 3 signings: Kostas Tsimikas, Thiago Alcantara and Diogo Jota. It really does seem to be that Liverpool are looking to strengthen in a position of strength, and I'm sure the rest of the Premier League will be taking note.
Exactly that. I think the rest of the Premier League obviously knows that Liverpool won the title by 18 points last season. The fact that they've now got in these 2 players who realistically could get into most, certainly Thiago would get into every Premier League team. Jota probably would get into most of them as well. So to add those 2 pieces of quality, and we know that someone like Gini Wijnaldum's future doesn't necessarily lie away from Liverpool in the immediate future just because of this deal being done. He very much could stick around as well. So it's very much 2 additions to the squad that Liverpool already had. It's part of that refresh. It's part of the squad building. It's just a really exciting time, I think, for Liverpool to get both of these deals done. It just really shows the ambition that they had. Obviously, there's been a lot of stick for FSG and Jurgen Klopp's strategy this summer. But we've said it all along, obviously, they weren't necessarily looking to go out and splash loads of cash. But if the right deals came up at the right time for the right price, they always said that they would get those deals done. And that's exactly what they've done. So I think Jurgen Klopp can be very, very happy indeed. Obviously, he's now got a specialist left back in reserve in Tsimikas. He's got a world-class midfielder. And now he's got what really most Liverpool fans were crying out for, as we say, a real top-class 4th choice option to slot into that front 3. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with some of the other options, Divock Origi and players like that, what happens now with their future. But the one thing we know for sure is that Diogo Jota is going to be a huge player for Liverpool. Thiago Alcantara, probably even more so. But for them both to come in on the same day is just a massive, monumental day for Liverpool. And we know how important and how much fanfare there is around transfer deals. Someone like Thiago certainly deserves that. Jota as well, I think, will prove that is rightfully being the case for him over the next 2 or 3 seasons as well. So, yeah, I'll say it again. It's a massively exciting day for Liverpool today.
Yeah, superlatives don't really seem to do today justice in terms of the transfer business that Liverpool have done. But of course, their Premier League title defence is already underway and it continues on Sunday at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea. Do make sure that you keep across the echo. And of course, Thiago Alcantara could well make his Liverpool debut, having signed in time to be part of the squad if Jurgen Klopp decides to do just that for the trip to Chelsea. Stick across the echo, stick across the Blood Red channels as well, whether it be our podcast platforms or our dedicated YouTube channel. There's plenty more in store to come. But from myself, Guy Clarke, and Matt Addison here on this transfer special edition of The Agenda, thanks for your time and company. It's bye for now.